Hello and welcome everyone to Ananke's third edition of Women in Literature Festival. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome my esteemed speakers, guests, Naveen Kishore, Hammad Hassan Rind, Mehr Husain, and Minhaj Ahmed Rafi. So welcome everyone.
Thank you, Sabin. Lovely to see everybody.
Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. Wonderful to be here.
So now I'll begin with the introductions. Naveen Kishore is a publisher and founder of Seagull Books in Kolkata, India. A theater practitioner, Naveen established Seagull Books as a response to the growing need for an Indian publishing house for theater and other arts. Among the many accolades, recognition, and awards, he received the 2021 Words Without Borders Ottawa Award for the promotion of international literature. In addition to being made, and apologies for the very bad pronunciation, he was made a Cavalier de l'Ordre des Arts et des Lettres in 2014 by the government of France, apologies again, and received the Goethe Medal from the Federal Republic of Germany in 2013. Last year, his immense book of poems published by Speaking Tiger came out, titled Knotted Grief, for which we are here to talk about. And it is followed by Mother Muse Quintet, which was published by Speaking Tiger in March this year. So welcome.
Thank you.
Hammad Rind.
Sorry.
Hammad Rind is a Welsh Pakistani writer and translator. His debut novel, For the Vaches, a satire loosely based on a dastan by Indian poet Amir Khusro, was longlisted for the British Science Fiction Association Award. He is the Urdu translator of Naveen Kishore's debut poetry collection, Knotted Grief. Ahmed did a BA in English and Persian literature and law at the Punjab University, Lahore, and an MA in filmmaking at the Kingston University, London. He is currently working on his second novel. Welcome, Hammad.
Thank you very much.
Mehr Husain is a British Pakistani journalist and founder of independent publishing house Uljha Books, a groundbreaking organization as it not only focuses on sustainable publishing, but is the first in Pakistan, if not the region, to talk about issues of climate change and sustainability vis-a-vis the publishing landscape. Author of Pakistan, A Fashionable History, she has worked in different roles in the media industry as an assistant editor at Good Times magazine, as a columnist for India's Mail Today, where her column, The Lahore Log, also appeared in the Daily Mail / Mail Online. Meher's commentary has appeared in The Economist, Economist 1843, The Times of London, The Diplomat, India's Mail Today, The Mail, Libas, The Friday Times, Herald, Pakistan Today, The News International, The Nation, and Pakistan Link. She was also the editor for Multan, A Spiritual Legacy, which was presented to Queen Elizabeth in 2013. In 2018, she founded Zuka, a social enterprise, and set up Zuka Books in 2020. Mehr holds an MSc in Asian Politics from SOAS, University of London, and a BSc in Politics with Business Management from Queen Mary, University of London. She was also accepted into an MPhil in South Asian Studies at St. Edmund's College, Cambridge. She's currently working as a news editor of Naya Daur and the Friday Times, Pakistan. Welcome, Mehr.
Thank you.
Minhaj Ahmed Rafi graduated from the National College of Arts in Lahore, Pakistan. He has been working in the media and arts landscape for over a decade now. Minhaj is currently working for a brand as design lead and as design director for Pakistan Standard, previously known as Newsweek Pakistan. His body of work includes cover illustrations for Newsweek Europe and Latin America, in addition to working as a design consultant for the Lahore Literary Festival. Recently, his illustrations were displayed at Jaipur Art Book Depot alongside 36 other top artists with the THP Dark Edition 1. In 2019, he was appointed the sole art director for Pakistan's first non-fiction book about Pakistan's fashion industry, Pakistan, A Fashionable History. He is the recipient of an honorable mention at the prestigious ADA Awards for his fashion book. He has designed the book cover for Pakistani politician and author Shahri Rahman's Women's Planning. His most recent work is the thought-provoking cover, illustration, and layout for the book Uljha Gham, today, which we are going to talk about. So welcome, Minhaj.
Thank you so much.
And with this, I'd like to open this discussion with a rendering by Naveen. Naveen, if you could do us the honor.
Thanks very much, Sabin. Wonderful. I shall plunge straight into it. Maybe begin with just a few. The book, Knotted Grief, begins with a long set of almost 108 short texts, poems. It's entitled Kashmiriyat. It sort of speaks for itself. Maybe with Hammad's help, I'll do just about 7 or 8 of them quickly, and maybe he can then translate, and then I can do 1 or 2, and then, we could, unless you want to do, shall I just do all the 8 small ones, and then you do it, Hammad?
Yeah, no, I'm happy with your lead, Naveen.
Okay.
Whatever you, yes.
So, uncaged, this long, ailing night, left to die, like an aging raven, unused to flying, flailing its wings, mortified, this cagelessness humiliating. Smothered flame of candle crushed between thumb and forefinger, charred night. Burst into flame, solitary flower, immolate, your petals detonating like suicide vests, making pale the glitter of the stars, the sky, shredded raining fire, scorching an earth already weary of its own blood. Take back the night. Shatter stillness, the night on crutches. The sun shrouded in a cloak of night, refusing point blank to rise. Bird stripped of sight, seeking refuge in a sky full of bullet wounds. Burnt stumps, gather the ashes, scatter the ashes into the wind. And the last one in this section, breaking the silence, death's soft whisper. Over to you, Ahmed.
Thank you very much, Naveen. Really beautiful. So it's from Kashmiriyat. ये बेपिंजरा लंबी बीमार रात जिसे मरने के लिए तन्हा छोड़ दिया गया, किसी बूढ़े कव्वे की तरह जिसे उड़ने अपने पर फड़फड़ाने की आदत न रही हो, शर्म में डूबी जिल्लत से भरी ये बेपिंजरा बेसूद आजादी। बुझी हुई शमा की लौ, कुचली हुई अंगूठे और शहादत की उंगली के दरमियां झुलसी हुई रात। शोले में फटता इकलौता फूल जला डालो अपनी पत्तियों को, फटती हुई खुदकुशी की जैकेटों की तरह जिनकी अलाव से सितारों की चमक दमक फीकी पड़ जाए। आसमान ने बरसती आग की धज्जियां करके पहले से अपने ही खून से थकी हारी जमीन को झुलसा डाला। वापस ले लो रात को, पाश पाश कर दो सुकूत को, बैसाखियों के सहारे खड़ी रात। रात के लिबादे में मलफूफ उठने से यकसर इनकार करता सूरज, जिसकी बीनाई छीन ली गई गोलियों के जख्मों से भरे आसमान में पनाह ढूंढता परिंदा। जले हुए तने इकट्ठी करो राख, बिखेर दो राख हवा के रुख, खामोशी को पाश पाश करती हुई मौत की नर्म सरगोशी.
Thank you. That was wonderful. The second section begins with something called Street Full of Widows. Maybe just the first three, they're very small. Across the barbed wire, bisecting the curfew, stand three women, their bodies covered in black. Only the red of the eyes guides them to graveyards. Covered in snow this month of August, foretelling the bitter winter. Watch the men run, die. Streets full of widows. The deserted street allows the child to play hopscotch. She hops on one leg, then the other, muttering names of missing friends under her breath. The lake waters listen in silence. No one speaks ill of the dead here. No one speaks. Tongue hidden deep in your throat, you swallow.
Thank you, Naveen. बेवाओं से भरी गलियां. That's the second part of the book. बेवाओं से भरी गलियां, खारदार बाढ़ के पार, कर्फ्यू को चीरती, तीन औरतें स्याही में लिपटी खड़ी हैं. उनकी आंखों की सुर्खी ही उन्हें रास्ता दिखाती है कब्रिस्तानों का, जो अगस्त ही से बर्फ में ढके शदीद सर्दियों की खबर दे रहे हैं. मर्दों को दौड़ते देखो, मरते देखो, देखो उन गलियों को जो बेवाओं से भरी हैं. सूनी गली एक बच्ची को पहल दूज खेलने की इजाजत देने पे मजबूर. कभी एक पांव पर, कभी दूसरे पर उछलती हुई बच्ची जेरे लब खोए हुए दोस्तों के नाम दोहराते हुए खेल में डूबी. झील का पानी अपनी खामोशी पुकारते हुए गाफिल. जो गुजर गए उन्हें कोई बुरा नहीं कहता, यहां कोई कुछ नहीं कहता. गले में दबी आवाज खामोशी से निगल दो. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One last one, which gave Knotted Grief the title. Braided silence, learning to live with knotted grief. You do your own thing when you sing the grieving. Yes, you do your own thing when you do sing your grieving. Knotted silence, braided grief. Yes, you do learn to do your own thing. Knotted braids, grieving, silence. Knotted braids, grieving, silence. Hear it yourself first. Slowly then, in rhythm with your own silence. Braided grief, you learn to chase your gods into a corner. Hide their light, plunge into darkness. Tie them up in knotted grief. Braided silence. Thank you.
उलझे गम के साथ रहना सीखती गुंधी हुई खामोशी. तुम अपनी करनी कर गुजरो. जब तुम सोग मनाती हुई हाँ गाती हो तो तुम अपनी करनी कर रही होती. जब तुम अपनी सोग मनाती उलझी हुई खामोशी, गुंधा हुआ गम हाँ गाती हो तो तुम अपनी करनी करना सीखती हो. खामोशी का सोग मनाता उलझा जूड़ा, खामोशी का सोग मनाता उलझा जूड़ा. पहले खुद सुनो आहिस्तगी से, धीरे से, फिर अपनी खामोशी की धुन पर गूंधे हुए गम के साथ तुम अपने खुदाओं को एक गोशे में धकेलना, उनकी रोशनी बुझाना, तारीकी में धकेलना, उन्हें उलझे गम में गूंधी हुई खामोशी में बांध लेना सीख लेती हो। थैंक यू।
Thank you, Ahmed. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Naveen and Ahmad, for uh, uh, taking us there. And I've heard it's such, it brings out so many emotions. So thank you so much for that. And with this, I'll start with the questions, and I'll take help from the review I had written for Knotted Grief, because my question basically revolves around grief, the private and the collective. And I'll just read the excerpt. Indeed, deep and bewildering grief may be, it is also visceral as it is constant. A solace, and I quote from Knotted Grief, a solace for the young widow who waits and waits, with sweet sorrow keeping her company, or placating comfort even for the wounded earth awaiting the onslaught of winter snow. Grief is life's constant, ever-trusted companion, entwined with it in an eternal quasimodic embrace that turns into ashes when separated. What is grief but a healing salve for the soul, scouring away all the violations of life? Life is like a book of yellowed pages containing freshly pressed petals, replacing older, dried, brittle flowers, gathering dust and silverfish, yet sanctioning affliction as one traverses through it, flicking through with fingers full of paper cuts. Knotted Grief by Naveen is a mirror, vast and silent, and yet truly evocative as it compassionately speaks volumes of anguished pain. With these words, I would like to ask each of you how you untie and unravel grief. Unravel it through your work, the art, which again is so private yet public, so personal and intimate and collective. So I'll begin with Naveen.
Oh, I've done enough, I thought. So book.
How you having?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's very briefly, the whole business of knotted grief and, of course, grieving. I mean, in today's world, it's a constant state. So at one level, because my practice of writing is a daily thing, you cannot stay with one topic. You're responding to the times, you're responding to what's happening around you. What you have are a number of folders, and the Kashmir or the grief were different folders, which, quite simply in the hands of an able editor, combined personal grieving, in this case, loss of not one, but two mothers, and with that other loss, that other grieving of what we stood for as human beings in these, not just ours, but in yours and many other countries. So it becomes, goes, the personal becomes the political shifts, and you can't really tell any longer which mother you're talking of at a certain level. And, but when you're actually writing it, you're actually moved by the moment that is unfolding in time around you, the moment that is unfolding in your head as memory. So when I'm talking of Kashmir, it's easily replaceable with any other troubled spot, whether it's in your country or in Palestine, or Syria, or wherever. But the grieving somehow remains reasonably universal. It's not somebody reporting from the streets. It's just a kind of palpable condition that one shares in that sort of way. And I suppose the practice of writing also helps you traverse time and memory, both in terms of what happened and what happens later in today's time when you're writing about the past, and the present receding very quickly and immediately. So there's a question of how time unfolds. Yeah, I guess that's it. It's a state of, it's there. I mean, one carries it like a second skin.
Ahmad?
Thank you, Sabin. Yeah, beautiful words, Naveen. And I'm sort of lost for words now after that. But yes, grief is among many colors of of our life. Grief is a very powerful, strong color, a very strong emotion, and it comes from different types of loss, obviously, but and there's personal and collective. So, for example, every year we have a collective sort of renewal of grief in terms of tradition and customs in South Asia and other parts of the world where there's Shia population, for example. There's a yearly renewal of that collective grief, and it can be really cathartic in that sort of way as well. If I may, I am the project I'm currently working on is also about grief in a way. So it's about the legacy of a military dictator in Pakistan, and it's set in right after the death of this military dictator, and especially this legacy on Pakistani culture, Pakistani society, and especially in particular on the Shia minority in Pakistan. So that's the project I'm working on, and it also deals with the themes of grief and loss. So yes, I mean, I think that's about it. That's how I deal with it in my work, or yeah.
Thank you so much, Hammad. Mehr?
I think there are different ways that grief has manifested itself. For myself, I think Minhaj would agree with me in this by saying that grief is a universal feeling, but what's interesting is that there are different contexts of grief, particularly for those of us who come from South Asia, the subcontinental region, because as Ahmad said, there's definitely the religious element of it. Then there's also the political of it, as Naveen said. In the context of Pakistan, I think there are so many different types of grief, and it affects us as individuals, no matter how non-political one may be, or whether you don't belong to a marginalized religious sect. Ultimately, grief is very much part of your lived experience. And it's interesting because for such an emotional nation or region, rather, there's very little that's actually written about grief, and it's sort of swept under the rug. There's not much space where you can express it, and instead you're constantly told to counter it through sabr or patience, or just accept it as kismet or God's will. And that interests me, because what is it? There's an element of fear, why don't you want to address this grief now? Whether that's because we're so used to it now, especially in Pakistan. I mean, every other day something is happening, and there's a sense of somberness that seeps in, right? And so we tend to sort of counter that grief by finding other ways of release, or not even willing to acknowledge it. But I think that in Pakistan specifically, we are now seeing that manifestation of grief through various art forms. I mean, Minhaj will definitely explain more about his work and through how he channels it. But even in art, and through the environment, what we're looking at recently, there was an exhibition by an artist. He was talking about how the environment is suffering and how that's a matter of for us of source karna. The word of source and grief, they sort of merged somewhere along the way. And grief is just being for many people now. I just see it that way. It's just there. It's just there. And yes, the catharsis is there for a certain segment of society, but there's also a very bizarre lived experience where you're just supposed to wake up the next day and get over it and get on with it because zindagi jeeni hai. You just accept it. And I don't think that's the most healthy way to do it. But I think we need to definitely explore it more and more.
True. Life doesn't just go on, right?
Oh no, it doesn't. It can't. But then, how do you just find coping mechanisms? That's what you do.
True. Minhaj, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Being an artist, grief is like at a collective level, it affects you. Everything affects you. And an artist channelizes it through their work. But on a personal level, 7 years ago, I lost my son. And after that, the difficult thing was the expectation of the society and people around you, how you supposed to act. That's the very difficult thing. Everyone channelized their grief, their gham in a different manner. Some people like to hide it, some like to show it to everyone. But the society, especially in the Indo-Pak subcontinent, here we usually face people's expectation. Men don't cry. It shows your weakness or something like that. But artists usually are the sensitive people. So to me, that affected me. But everything around economic conditions, social Shia killings, Zainab rape case, everything affected me. And when I do my work, I try to show my grief in some way in my work. Like I recently did this, the cover for Uljha Gham. उसमें मैंने अपना गम भी कहीं ना कहीं मिक्स किया है उसके साथ. So yeah.
Ji, when I saw the book, the cover, जो उसमें hues, beautiful hues. Thank you, Mehr. जिस तरीके से वो colors show कर रहे हैं और जो it's beautiful, and how वो connection जो है उन colors के साथ जो different motifs हैं, they're beautiful, और वो ये बात relay कर रहे हैं उस गम का जो आप feel कर रहे हैं और वो जो हम भी feel कर रहे हैं, collectively. So thank you so much, Minhaj, for sharing that.
Thank you.
Coming to my next question, which basically focuses on moving beyond borders and geographies and line and meter and length. And again, I take help from, the review. So Knotted Grief is a book of poems, and it is rather a moving rendition that goes beyond line, meter, and length. Just like, for me, just like life itself. And when tasked with penning a review for a work of fiction, one might indeed find the exercise thrilling, but unraveling creations as riveting as Knotted Grief takes one on a soul-searching journey, navigating not just through one's own experiences of the whips and scorns of time, but also through the crooked timber of humanity that has even led philosophers of old to surmise no straight line, no straight thing can ever be made. But perhaps that is what, Naveen, you are compelling us to comprehend and make sense of. Life seeks no sensibility. Existence is, and again I quote from Knotted Grief, it's like the sun shrouded in a cloak of night, refusing point blank to rise, reluctantly awaiting to be violently birthed and weaned from the womb. Life, like art, life, joy, grief, they are, and like you mentioned in one of your writing, and I'm summarizing here, darkness does not announce its arrival, it arrives. So it is about moving beyond the shackles of boundaries, geographies, from line, meter, and length. Is it, Naveen?
Yeah, I guess so, in the sense that one doesn't actively plan it like that, but when you read it and try and get a sense of it, it's always a sense even of awe and surprise that the writing speaks across these emotions, these, borderlessness of certain kind of collective emotion. But when you're actually doing it, at least when I'm actually doing it, I'm just, it's not like a conscious planned thing. It couldn't be, then it would have to be an essay of sorts, not a poem. But interestingly, the borderlessness in this gathering is also linked to all of us and our publishing worlds and our, the so-called, persuasions and the labels given to us by our countries. And yet we've managed to cross that.
But there's also a sense of grief there as well. I mean, it's interesting. There are 4 different countries here. And and in fact, Minhaj, if you remember, that's one of the things I said to you as well. Naveen, you might find this interesting. I said, the title, it has to reflect both India and Pakistan, and the background has to be Kashmir, that, this is where we are. And Minhaj, do you remember when I said, India, Pakistan, dono ka kuch haath hona chahiye isme? And that's where it really came in, because I think inherently when it comes to borders, there is definitely an element of grief there as well. I mean, you just have to go to Vaga. The pomp and shows are very nice. It's a lot of fun, but there's also that heaviness of that area, that particular patch of land, no man's land. And it's a constant festering wound. So I think as long as, the subcontinent, the South Asian region is there, and there are some people whose wound is never healed. So for Kashmiri to come through this way, and then in such an international project, I mean, there are elements of decolonization as well, but there's also definitely this element of healing in some way, really small way, but tiny, tiny way. I mean, there are people in 4 countries sitting here right now. So we're getting there slowly, slowly.
No, I mean, I would like to add that it's in that way, the way it's brought all these people from different countries together, the project has been amazing. And I remember in one of the first meetings we had about Knotted Grief, and I pointed out that the form in which Naveen has written these poems would be called Azad Nazm, and Naveen really liked that expression of the Nazm, or the poetry or the poem verse being Azad, because it's quite ironic in a lot of ways, because we are talking about pinjra, cages, and wires, barbed wires, and borders, and all that, and then verse, that aspect is still free, thankfully. So yes, there is an element that we can rejoice, that we can be happy about.
I have to say there was another layer of grief with this book, and I don't think Minhaj will ever say anything, so I will say this on behalf of Minhaj. When Hammad shared the manuscript, it never got formatted, so Minhaj had to write the entire book out in Urdu. And I remember thinking, good grief. And it was like, it just hit me. I was like, are you kidding me?
God. Okay.
Happening? And so he had to write the whole book himself out in Urdu again.
I'm really sorry for the trouble, Minhaj. I didn't realize, I didn't envisage that it would cause such a big issue.
I don't even know the technical side of it. I mean, Minhaj.
And something interesting, sorry, just a very quick aside. I was recently at a very small literary festival in a part of a country called Jharkhand, which was carved out of Bihar and so on and so forth. And there's a very interesting, enlightened district collector who has a library, and he's got this literary festival place called Dumka. And so some of us gathered there. It was all wonderful, and nobody briefed us about audiences. And then there were all these young people. They looked like they'd been told to come as batches of schoolgirls, about 200-300 of them, big auditorium. And suddenly we realized that bhai Hindustani mein baat karni padegi, because they were not going to be. Ab main Angrezi mein not hit grief padunga, it doesn't make sense. And what saved me was Hammad's. I had 6-7 poems he had written them out in Roman. So I said, I read those. It was great fun. Yeah, I thought I found them on my thing. Baki baatcheet to ho jati, lekin, I couldn't do instant translations, and the Hindi version wasn't ready. So it was wonderful. Just an aside.
No, but it's interesting how it's sort of how this book really came into being. I mean, I still don't know how, Minhaj, maybe you can explain this, how you actually wrote the book together, because I just don't know what happened. We tried different formats, it wasn't working out, and then ultimately it was like, likhni padegi phir mere khyaal se, and that's all that we can do.
नहीं वो लिखनी पड़ी दोबारा से, बट उस लिखने में उसको बार बार पढ़ा तो और मजा आया मुझे. I enjoyed it. I felt every word of it. और फिर मैंने महर को कहा कि महर initially came to me for कि just you have to design a cover और अंदर simple layout, just the text. It was like, Mehr, it's not the justice to the text. There should be some graphical element. She said, no, Minhaj, actually we have a limitation of single color printing inside, so we can't do anything. I was like, we have a single color, right? So we can do graphics in single color. So let's try something out. Then I experimented the layouts and I showed it to Mehr and she loved it. And so has everyone. So वो बड़ा एक मजेदार process था. I love.
Cover के बारे में बताइए, because I have one version from Mehr. It would be interesting to know how it all came together and
This
what
is the
was first reaction.
Let's.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Okay, so I think from my very early memories, Uljha Gham, the concept jo tha, my mother used to do embroideries. So I used to play with her threads. वो रेशम के धागे होते थे, उनसे खेलता था, तो उसमें गुंजन पड़ जाते थे, वो उलझ जाते थे, और फिर मुझे बहुत डांट पड़ती थी. तो वहां से गम स्टार्ट हुआ था. तो basically the concept of two hands, the two nations. महर ने मुझे बोला था कि हमने दो इंडिया और पाकिस्तान का कुछ मर्जर दिखाना है. So basically the title Uljha Gham, I did it in two languages, Hindi and Urdu. I fused them together. So, and with the hands, there is a thread going to basically Uljha Gham. Both are, and for the background, I used hues of blues, because for me, blue depicts a bit of sorrowness and gloominess, but on the other hand, blue is also a color of hope. So uske different hues ko maine experiment kiya. Then there was a texture of barbed wires I used. Then a little small migrants going down, if you notice them closely. So there's a lot going on the cover. So once I started doing it, I was just adding things and playing with it. and it was just like my romance to my illustration.
No, it was wonderful. When I saw it, I instantly I said, where can I share it?
No,
So
I think
now,
Minhaj, what I wanted to ask you was that you've got this is sort of like this kala swa, you know, swa here, and this in particular, I found extremely shocking. It really hit home, like the black, you know, the tree burning and then the soot that's left. And I think, you know, Sabin, this is also indicative of how your grief does leave a mark on you. You know, people find coping mechanisms. I mean, we all have different variations of grief in our lives, but it leaves a mark. It certainly alters your state of being. I don't know. I mean, how would you address something when it's not just a state of being, but it becomes a form of identity? I mean, is that something how you look?
no, I'm at one level, one is totally unprepared, and at another level, I've always said that one's life is a kind of rehearsal, and there are many performances. This is a performance where one brings the rest of lived life to every moment of every word uttered, discussed, because you're provoking some kind of thinking. So there is a kind of thoughtfulness to every moment, but it's not like we have to do homework. We have rehearsed it, we're rehearsing it. So whether it's grief, there is an anticipation from the moment you're born or you're living with parents or, you know, nations such as ours, you know that is a constant companion. It's like, you know, I've often told a lot of close friends, especially these days, that the thing about any kind of sense of the low or blue, or as one uses it in the English American language, or grieving of a certain kind, or anxiety, I tend to cope with it by embracing it, literally. I mean, it's like I let it, it's almost masochistic. I let it just overpower me till it becomes a palpable part of, you know, physically, it's a physical ache that slowly eases. And then, of course, writing is, of course, connected. It is not like one and the other, but it's just somehow connected. And that also helps conversations, relationships. I mean, we are a relationship, you know, in the sense that we've never met and we don't know when we will meet. And yet there is this sense that one would do anything for you, you know, each one of you. So there's all of that, I think, forms our condition, which we call the human condition. Sorry, I'm going somewhere else.
और नवीन, आप जो embrace करने की बात कर रहे हैं, I'll take it back to Minhaj when he spoke about आप बचपन में आप अपनी अम्मी का जो वो knitting करती थी, and you're talking about mother, right? और वो कवर के अंदर किस तरीके से डिपिक्ट कर रहा है, किस तरीके से रेजोनेट कर रहा है, वो माँ की डांट या माँ की डांट का गम उस किताब के कवर के ऊपर, जो कि एक होमलैंड के ऊपर बात कर रहा है. और वो होमलैंड जो है, वो मट्टी जो है, मट्टी तो एक ही है, चाहे वो लाहौर में बारिश हो रही हो या कोलकाता में बारिश हो रही हो. एक ही टाइम पे, नवीन, if you remember, you were in Delhi at that time somewhere, and you know, I was talking about rain in Karachi, and it was raining, and तो वो सारी चीज जो है वो कितने आराम से मिलती है. So talk us through that process of, you know, जिस तरीके से आपने अपनी माँ को उसमें शामिल किया, to talk about, you know, this cover, or to show your emotions about this homeland. Minhaj.
So basically वो जो बताने का था मकसद वो ये था कि मेरा जो किसी चीज के उलझने का जो कॉन्सेप्ट था वो मेरा वहां से मुझे समझ आया था कि क्या होता है. बिकॉज तुमने फिर उलझा दिए धागे, तो और फिर डांट भी पड़ती थी, मार भी पड़ती थी, तो आई जस्ट लाइक व्हाई शी नेवर लेट मी प्ले विद देम. क्या हो गया, थोड़े से धागे ही हैं. लेकिन वो धागे जो हैं कभी कभी किसी के लिए बहुत मुश्किल खड़ी कर देते हैं ना, उलझ जाए तो इसी तरह अगर हम कलेक्टिव लेवल पे बात करें तो भी ऐसा ही है कि कुछ चीजें बहुत ज्यादा उलझ जाती हैं तो उससे बहुत लोग सफर करते हैं, तो उनको थोड़ा आसान करना या एक्सप्रेस करना बड़ा जरूरी है।
Ahmad, I'll ask you the same question in the sense that you are now, you had this huge task of migrating those thoughts. We have a section on the migratory experience of language. वही सवाल I'll put it for, I'll ask you कि वो जो process था वो क्या था, that migratory experience of language, और वो माइग्रेशन जो है वो दूसरी माइग्रेशन जो सब कॉन्टिनेंट की माइग्रेशन है उसको भी मद्देनजर रखें, और the distance and the grief, what was the process?
Yeah, no, it's interesting how you put it. कि एक physical migration है, a physical migration that took place and that's still taking place even now. For example, all of us, are migratory in some sense or other, and then there's a migration in terms of linguistic migration. जब आप ट्रांसलेशन कर रहे हैं, जब आप तर्जुमा कर रहे हैं, तो जबान जो है वो एक जबान से दूसरी जबान में जब उसको आप एक नया पहनावा देते हैं, तो वो जिस तरह से वो दूसरी जबान में हिजरत करती है, माइग्रेट करती है, वो माइग्रेशन भी है उसमें. तो and before that I would actually Minhaj, what Minhaj just mentioned, the word which I really liked, gunjal, the word for knot in Punjabi, gunjal, a very interesting word. So yeah, gunjal was one of the main themes of knotted grief, obviously, and gunjala, and the poem that Naveen just read about braided, those braids, that I really like that image of guntha hua juda, that those knotted braids. So there are different types of those knots. There are knots that Minhaj mentioned, and then there are knots which are used in these braids. So yes, I mean it's a very interesting and at times challenging process as well, because we have limitations of a language, and Urdu typically uses sort of a rhymed and more sort of how would you put it, more disciplined sort of, more restrained sort of verse, mostly in classics, especially in classical literature. You would find that most writers have written in rhymes and all that, and with Naveen's poetry, and although I mean there's obviously a tradition, ek riwayat hai Urdu mein bhi Azad Nazm ki, and some very famous writers, especially of modern times or contemporary times, somewhat, have experimented in that as well, like Fad, for example, or Noon Mim Rashid and all that. But still, when we think of Urdu poetry, we think of ghazal and all that. So what I found to some extent challenging was how to migrate this the limitations that the syntax, English syntax, brings to you in a way, how to put it across in Urdu, because some of the poems, some of the lines were really minimalistic in a way, and to put them across into Urdu in a way that they would still make sense sometimes was challenging. And I'm really grateful to both Naveen and Mehr for their, for the generosity of their time. Whenever I was at a stage, at a point where I was sort of struggling with it, or when I found it, a bit challenging, I consulted with them, and they were really helpful in that sort of a way. So yes, I mean, there were a lot of different types of migrations going on in
And it was beautifully encapsulated by Mehr through Zuka books. Mehr, tell me how that experience was.
I think there were moments of comic relief, because one of the things that hit me first and foremost was the idea of knotted grief. And we have the whole shrine culture, and then you tie the manat to the dhaga and then around your wrists and everything. So that was one of the first things that struck me, was like the symbolism of this project. I mean, what it meant to me on a spiritual level as well. But I think one of the most interesting aspects of working on this project was seeing the funny side of it. I mean, you all know I love a good laugh. And I think one of the best parts was, like I said, dealing with Minhaj and thinking, good grief, he's actually going to have to write the entire book out. I was like, chalo, theek hai, good luck. All right, this is yours. But with Hammad, there was this one particular story, and I think this is something I'll always cherish, was when Hammad once said, he was very serious. He said, I really need to speak to you about this. I just don't know what to do about it. And I was like, all right, fine. We'll have a Zoom session. And of course, we get there, and Hammad, polite and proper as always. And he goes, again, the way Naveen has written it, I can't seem to capture it in Urdu, because Urdu is this. And I said, all right, well, fine. What's the problem? Which one is it? Right? He goes, I'll read one out. I said, and he goes, blues ka show shuru karo. And I was like, you do know what country I'm in, right? But the blues ka show, I just have to announce it in the press release, and I'll be hauled in by some ministry or something. So I think in moments of grief, I do find that if you have some comic relief, again, it helps as a sense of coping with it. But there's also a sense of the human nature, the humanness. It's like Naveen said, you have to let it wash over yourself. You have to own it. You have to let it, define you to a certain extent. But on the other hand, it can also help you wash away so many things about yourself, and you come out a changed person. Now, what that change is, good or bad, depends very much on the situation. I mean, Minhaj, living in Pakistan, I know that we've seen so many devastating and experienced so many devastating things that have definitely marked us. Because again, what happens societally, what happens politically, ultimately has a trickle-down effect on each one of us, right? And in my personal capacity, I didn't realize how much it was affecting me till I physically moved away from Pakistan, right? And then it began to affect me that, oh gosh, this is that, and everything. But yeah, I think Uljha Gham, or Knotted Grief, is an important piece of work. And I'm not just saying this because Naveen is here. I'm saying this because this is a reminder of, yet again, of where we are regionally, particularly in the context of Kashmiriyat, 75 years later on. I mean, 75 years it's a substantial amount of time. It's not a lot of time. It's a substantial amount of time. And the flow of blood is just not stopping. So then where do we go? What do we do? How do we even begin to address it through the written word? And it's interesting because I do love the written word, but I do feel that, the mode of the written word has got to change, which is why I absolutely loved having Minhaj on board, was because of his graphic design skills. And then when he came up with the idea of putting mini graphics inside the book, I had my reservations. I was like, oh gosh, I don't know what's going to happen, because I'd seen his work for the fashion book and it was a different kind. But I do begin to believe now that the written word is changing. Language is changing how we utilize it. And emotions are being expressed in a lot more sophisticated manner than what we may be used to.
Thank you so much, Mehr. One last question before we move to another amazing thing. And it's basically, I'd like to know how, I know that for a fact कि कितनी खूबसूरत collaboration हुई है, but in your own words, I'd like you to say something about that. With Naveen going first.
Oh, collaboration as in the, well, I mean, other than the publishing collaboration, which happened with great serendipity, and you were part of it, Mehr was part of it, I mean, and it happened quite naturally and generously. But for me, what I really enjoyed was the fact that from the early days when Hammad painstakingly was sending me Angrezi mein likhi hui, he wanted to get a sense of it. And I just kept coming back to his Azad thing and saying that, look, it's as much your baby and it's your freedom to do and make, because it's in a different language, it's your language that it has to make sense in. And I don't think there was any rigidity or, so that sense there was that collaboration happening. And in the same way, when Mehr and I decided to do this, I was extremely grateful and excited and full of joy that it was happening, despite not having been together physically in one space or in one country or the other. We seemed to very fluidly migrate into each other's affections, which was very wonderful. And then the cover came, I was really, everyone, in fact, at Seagull was all like, how wonderful, and I remember Mehr saying that she was, initially there was a sense of minimal versus whatever. And I said, no, but there's so much happening each time you look at that, the tiny image that I got, I would find those, the actual tapestry behind the lettering, behind the hands, behind the thread. It was like he had summed up Kashmiriyat in a certain kind of way and presented us elements, hints, not giving the whole thing away. So thank you.
I think Minhaj ने जो वो लिखा, वो जो process था, उसने भी reinforce किया जो उनकी जो वो depict करना चाह रहे थे through his art. But coming over to you, Mehr, your thoughts?
I think Naveen has been incredibly generous for this work. I mean, the fact that, friendship aside, Naveen is such a senior publisher, that's something that has never, ever escaped my mind, and that he took a great big chance at this. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I'm very much aware that I'm just a speck of dust, and in the publishing industry, very much an infant. Naveen Chup. But it's true. I mean, there was also, I remember Sabin talking to you, I was like, should I give Naveen a publishing contract? I mean, he's so senior, what do I do? This is going to look so stupid. Here I am, junior kid, going, this is you. It's like, what do I do? How do I deal with this? But I think the message here is that good things can happen if we find ways to work together, particularly in the Indo-Pak context. And this is something that I keep coming up against when I speak to other publishers or writers in India, or even here in the Middle East. I've come across so many different members from the media here, and they're all talking about how, pehle India, Pakistan ki kya halat hote the, and that's something that strikes me, how we're constantly referring to the past. So there's definitely an element of loss, right? Mm. Now, how do we bridge that loss is where your platform, Sabin, comes into play. And interestingly, the community that's being created here, I mean, when I look at how Hammad's work written in Urdu, right, where technology did fail that one time, right, and for Minhaj to pick it up from looking at Hammad's work, again, it goes to show, okay, if we have a certain goal in mind, and we're all working towards it in our different ways. There's nothing better, right? You don't have to work in the same way. You certainly don't have to adopt each other's methodologies. But if the goal is the same, then I think we're all on the same path. And the best part is that, you know, in different projects that you work, not everyone comes out as friends, but here we have come out as friends. I mean, you know, Minhaj's kids are my kids, for example. I keep telling people, mere bache hain. And so on and so on. Naveen, of course, is my best friend for life, you know, and Sabin, you are love, and Hammad to khair is, you know, jaan ka tukda. But it's this is where we are, right? We're able to say these things. And I think that this will have an impact. That's my point. Ultimately, it will have an impact. Now, what that impact channels itself into, I don't know. Time will tell. Hopefully, we'll live long enough.
And to you know, talk about the technology aspect of it. Technology, मुझे लग रहा था कि वो establishment की तरह खड़ी हो गई थी सामने कि नहीं, हम नहीं करने देंगे. Or you know,
there was definitely that. I did.
Yeah, और ये resilience है art की, or you know, just interpreting it that way, कि you know, with passion and with, you know, जो हम सब की feelings थी, and you know, me stepping outside, all of you, you know, जिस तरीके से किया है वो collaboration, so that is resilience, you know, showcasing resilience के किसी किस्म की establishment जो है, चाहे वो technology क्यों ना हो, चाहे वो XYZ क्यों ना हो, that will not, we can take up that challenge, right?
There's also resistance. I mean, Minhaj, if you remember, even with our previous books, so not that I'm focusing on that, but I'm just saying that for us, it became, our work is not just our work. I'd love to be able to just do commercial stuff and that's it, you know, mindless, happy, whatever it is, that would be the dream. But given where we were in Pakistan, I mean, Minhaj, so much was happening. And suddenly when this happened, it was like, कुछ जिंदगी में आसान हो सकता है, सही नहीं हो सकता, चलो ठीक है, ये भी हम कर लेते हैं. You know, the act of resistance against all obstacles, it's become a way of living. It's not the best place to be. And again, there is definitely an element of grief there. You're grieving over, you know, what could have been, what should have been, and what it ought to be, and what it isn't. And that's something that I think, Minhaj, I think हमने वो अपना ली चीज, like Naveen said, na? That resistance is just there. Somebody could be nice to us and we'll be like, no. You know, it's like, no.
एक गली को ब्लॉक कर दिया तो दूसरी से गुजर जाएंगे ना.
We're at that point now where it's just like,
you know, I would like to share something. It was my first experience. I went to Karachi in somewhere around 2013. So when I landed, तो वहाँ पे कोई फसाद चल रहे थे, पूरी Sharai Festival was blocked
as usual,
and no car airport से जा नहीं सकती थी, कोई गाड़ी airport आ नहीं सकती थी. I was there on the airport for 8 hours.
Wow.
So then हमारे office से गाड़ी आई with guards and everyone to rescue us. तो रास्ते में वो एक guard से मैं बात कर रहा, तो he's like, क्या भैया हमें तो आदत हो गई है, एक गली से गुजरते हैं, फायरिंग हो रही होती है तो हम दूसरी गली से गुजर जाते हैं.
Exactly, absolutely.
So that's how we have learned things.
वो ना, तो नवीन की किताब जब आई, the magic of it initially quickly wore off because we were like, ये निकालनी है, बस निकालनी है, जिस तरह भी निकालनी है. And then even with Hammad, I think, you know, Hammad having to do the translation on his own, I did feel bad about that. I did feel, you know, he needs a lot more help. But there was also a sense of like, हो जाएगा यार, हो जाएगा, कर लेंगे, it'll be done.
True. Hammad?
No, I'm really grateful to all of you, especially to Mehr for first asking me for this amazing project to build on this, to embark on this journey, and I really enjoyed it. You know, I mean, it is a part of the process. Obviously, with when you're trying to translate something which at times you come across something which you find a bit elusive sometimes or challenging, and you have to make sense of it, and in a way that it comes across in a comprehensible way as well. So it was part of that, obviously, but yeah, I'm really grateful for this opportunity, and thank you all for this. And it's been an amazing collaboration and bringing all of us together. So yes, thank you all.
Thank you so much.
नवीन आप खुश हैं? सबसे बड़ी बात ये है.
That's खुश. I'll
That
be khusher when I get the books, but yes.
नहीं मिलेंगी definitely, but that's always been the main focus कि नवीन खुश हो जाए बस.
Naveen खुश हो रहा है. So Naveen expresses his khushiness all the time, constantly.
And with this, I'd like to end on, this is a high note, so another high note would be for Naveen to read something from his amazing new book that I'm waiting to get my hands on, Mother Muse Quintet. Naveen, if you could do us the honor.
This is basically, I guess, more grieving. It's about the mother, the descent into a fog and all of that. And yeah, I just read a few poems, which are kind of prose poems of a certain kind, some of them. She carried crumbs every single morning, the smell of bread every single morning, for as long as I can remember, for as long as she can remember. She never forgot to scatter the crumbs in every conversation, like puzzles or clues, to help her find her way home later, much later, when the mist from over there would begin to rise, stretch out, start to take charge, like the inevitable damp, cling to things in and around her. Then those scattered clues, like markers in a treasure hunt, those planted hints, they were the advance guard in a war that would surely take place. But in her innocence, she had failed to realize that the first casualty would be the power lines, short-circuited. The enemy would cut off her ability to recognize, to recall her master plan, to recognize the very signs she had so diligently left in place. Now, they were part of a geography lesson, a map of an alien landscape of her own making. You gifted me my memory. We did not know then. But one day you would lose yours. Just one last one, it's a bit longish. She was turning 75. She didn't see it as something special. The clear smile hadn't begun to lose its warmth, even as the mist had begun to appear at the fringes of her universe. Shuffling along the walls, trying to find a crevice through which to creep in, take up residence, entice the fog to follow. I remember buying her so many presents. There were the salwar and kameez sets, 3 of them, with contrasting or matching dupattas and her favorite dizzy lizzy fabric or very fine cotton, weightless, almost as if the haze that would appear before her eyes was making a peace offering. A bouquet of printed flowers, this one last. There were the lemon yellow roses she adored, a dozen of them, and a ceramic vase, deep blue, its edges tinged with gold, a watch with a thin leather strap. A metal one had begun to bother her. Steel gray, a white dial with large digits that glowed in the dark. A silver picture frame with a color photograph of her and my father from some years ago, taken at the Botanical Gardens. A pair of blue slippers to wear around the house. A spectacle case that shut with a sharp magnetic click, olive green, with pale yellow flowers, and a wall mirror, around 24 inches in length and 18 inches in width, with a dark brown 3-inch wooden frame inlaid with flowers and burnished gold. Perhaps I had noticed that she had no dressing table in front of which to comb her hair. Later in the afternoon, for tea, there would be cake, eggless, chocolate. She opened each gift with care. She belonged to a generation that liked saving the wrapping paper. She folded each sheet carefully, made appropriately grateful noises over each object, made me feel that I had chosen well. But there was an air of detachment that manifested itself without in any way lessening the warmth. I sensed it, but it didn't ring any alarm bells. Nor did I feel she was thanking me because that is what one did on such occasions. That wasn't her way at all. Only when she arrived at the large mirror did she falter and solicit my assistance in opening it. I did, and held it for her to admire, holding it in front of her face as she sat in her sofa chair. She looked up at me, not at the mirror, at me, her eyes serious, quiet, not saying anything. Then with what seemed for the first time an effort, she smiled, thanked me, and started to talk about I'm not sure what, but no longer about the gifts. I arranged to put up a nail at her eye level and hung the mirror on the wall that faced her bed, between the door to her room and her bathroom, ease of convenience. Strangely enough, I never saw her using it. She didn't avoid it, but she never looked into it. Just continued to comb her hair in the small bathroom mirror the rest of the years she was with us. Later, of course, it wouldn't matter. Her gaze had already turned inward, not inward looking or seeing or meditative, just inward. The mirror is still there on the wall, on the nail, in the room. We still think of as hers. Thank you.
Beautiful.
That was
Thank you.
stunning. Thank you, Naveen. That was really beautiful.
And with this, we unfortunately come to the end of this session. I'd like to thank each and every one of you, Naveen, Mehr, Hammad, Minhaj, for this beautiful conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank
Sabin.
you.
Thank you,
you.
Sabin. Thank you for
I'd
having
like
us.
to I'd like to have a look at the Uljha Gham cover once again. Sorry for the so many.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Naveen, for the wonderful opportunity to do
Thank
this.
you very much for doing it. It's beautiful.
Mehr, how can we buy this book?
It's priceless. Sorry.
But for the audience, yeah, I
Yes,
absolutely
yes,
agree with you.
yeah. Just email me at zukabooks@gmail.com and I'll be happy to send you a copy.
Perfect. And Naveen, how can we get this one? I mean, I have it, luckily.
It's certainly a tricky one because there is no, I mean, there is the possibility of a US edition, but it's on Amazon. I'm not sure whether it's just on Amazon India or elsewhere. But again, write to me, I'll send you copies.
And can you show us Mother Muse Quintet as well?
Yes, sure. Yeah. Well, if you can make out, yes.
Yes.
Look
I
at
should
that.
have copies, my copies soon. So
Thank you.
Stunning.
Yes.
send it to you. Oh, lovely.
Thank-
Oh,
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank
Cool.
you.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye-bye.
Bye.